High Commander Zarlath reclined in his command chair aboard the massive Zorian flagship Devastator, his long, reptilian tail flicking lazily as he observed the incoming data on Earth. His cold, golden eyes narrowed in amusement as he reviewed the details of the planet's defenses. This so-called United Earth Defense Force barely even registered as a threat. The humans had no faster-than-light travel, no plasma weaponry, and no energy shields. They were little more than an inconvenience, a primitive species clinging to outdated kinetic weapons. Zarlath sneered. "Look at them," he hissed, his voice slithering through the air like venom. "They still rely on bullets and steel. How quaint." Around him, his officers tall, armored reptilian warriors chittered in laughter. The idea that this small, insignificant planet had the audacity to resist the mighty Zorian Empire was beyond ridiculous. "Commander," his lieutenant, Sirach, approached, bowing slightly. "The fleet is ready. Shall we begin the bombardment?" Zarlath waved his hand dismissively. "No need for a full bombardment. Let them tremble first. We'll send down the strike teams, mop up what little resistance they can muster, and bring me their leaders. We'll make an example of this Earth." Sirach grinned, baring sharp, serrated teeth. "And their technology?" Zarlath chuckled, a deep, menacing sound. "We'll take what little they have for the museums back on Zoria. A reminder of the primitive species we've crushed beneath our heel." As the Zorian fleet moved into Earth's orbit, their presence blotted out the sky in several of the planet's major cities. The humans watched in horror as enormous alien ships, shimmering with a metallic, iridescent glow, descended from the heavens. On every continent, Earth's militaries scrambled to respond. In the heart of the United Earth Defense Headquarters, General Jonathan Carter stood in the war room, staring at the massive holographic display of the invasion force. Around him, officers barked orders into radios, satellites tracked the fleet's movements, and tactical teams prepared for battle. Carter's face was stern, but his steel-blue eyes held no fear. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," one of his commanders said, shaking his head. "They've got plasma cannons, energy shields, ships the size of cities. We've never faced anything like this." General Carter's gaze never wavered. "They may be advanced, but they've underestimated us. That's their first mistake." He turned to his officers, his voice sharp and clear. "Activate the railguns, deploy the missile systems, and get the defense grid online. If they want a fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." Across the planet, hidden defense systems whirred to life. Railgun emplacements, massive weapons capable of launching projectiles at near-light speeds, emerged from camouflaged bunkers. Automated missile launchers rose from silos, tracking the enemy ships in orbit. Humanity had prepared for this day, even if the rest of the galaxy thought Earth was little more than a primitive backwater. The Zorian dropships descended from the main fleet like a swarm of locusts, black and menacing as they broke through the atmosphere. Their landing was met with eerie silence. The streets of Earth's cities were deserted, the humans seemingly retreating to their bunkers. The Zorians took this as confirmation of humanity's cowardice. High Commander Zarlath smirked as he watched the landing unfold on his view screen. "See how they cower before us?" he muttered. "This will be over by nightfall." On the surface, General Carter stood at the edge of a fortified position on a hill overlooking the Zorian landing zone. His eyes scanned the horizon as the alien forces began deploying. Tall, sleek figures stepping out of the black dropships, their weapons glistening in the afternoon sun. A young lieutenant approached him, looking nervous. "General, we've intercepted their communications. They're mocking us, sir. They think our weapons are outdated. They're laughing at our defenses." Carter's expression didn't change. "Good," he said, his voice calm. "Let them laugh. We'll see how funny they think this is soon enough." He turned back to his radio. "All units, prepare to fire on my command. Wait for them to move closer." The Zorians advanced, arrogant and overconfident, their ranks moving in perfect formation as they crossed the open terrain toward the human positions. They moved without haste, as if conquering Earth was a mere formality. Plasma rifles held high, their tanks floated inches above the ground, and drones scouted ahead, their black, hovering forms scanning for any signs of resistance. But they found nothing. Not yet. Zarlath watched with satisfaction from the bridge of Devastator, lounging in his command chair, lazily sipping a glass of purple liquid. He relished in the fear he believed Earth's inhabitants were experiencing. "They'll surrender soon," he said to Serac, "once they see the full strength of our forces." All back on the ground, General Carter's voice crackled over the comms. "All units, fire." In an instant, the landscape exploded with sound. Railguns roared to life, launching hyper-accelerated projectiles that tore through the air with a deafening sonic boom. Missiles streaked across the sky, targeting the Zorian tanks and gunships with pinpoint precision. The once calm battlefield was transformed into chaos. The Zorian tanks, expecting to shrug off the impact, were obliterated. The railgun rounds punched through their energy shields and armor as if they were paper, exploding in a cloud of metal and fire. Plasma cannons charged to retaliate, but human artillery shells struck their positions before they could fire. The Zorians, who had never faced kinetic weaponry of this caliber, were thrown into confusion. "What's happening?" Zarlath snarled, rising from his command chair, his glass shattering as it fell to the floor. "Commander," Serac stammered, his eyes wide with panic. "Their weapons, they're far more powerful than we anticipated. The railguns, our shields can't stop them." Zarlath's sneer faded into a grimace of rage. "Impossible. They're supposed to be a primitive species." He slammed his fist onto the console. This is just the beginning. They'll break. They always do." But as he watched his forces falter under Earth's counterattack, the realization began to sink in. They had underestimated humanity, and that mistake would cost them dearly. High Commander Zarlath paced the bridge of the Devastator, his claws clicking on the cold metal floor as the holographic display of the battlefield unfolded before him. Smoke and fire filled the air as railgun projectiles from Earth's hidden defenses struck his forces with terrifying accuracy. His once confident smirk had morphed into a scowl of disbelief. This was supposed to be an easy victory, just another backwater planet to add to the long list of conquered worlds. "Status report," he barked, his voice echoing across the command deck. His officers scrambled to respond, their reptilian fingers flying over control panels. "Commander?" Serac, his second-in-command, began nervously. "We've lost 3 tanks, 5 gunships, and 2 transport carriers. Our energy shields, they can't withstand the kinetic projectiles these humans are using. The railguns are—" "Enough!" Zarlath snapped, cutting him off. His golden eyes narrowed in fury as he turned to face the planet below. "How are these primitives inflicting such damage?" Serac hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The Zorian Empire had never encountered a species so technologically inferior that could cause this much devastation. The humans weren't supposed to be capable of this level of warfare. Zarlath clenched his fists, his claws digging into his palms. "Send reinforcements to the surface. Full deployment. If they want to play with their toys, we'll crush them underfoot." On the surface, General Carter stood among the smoking remains of Zorian vehicles, his expression grim but determined. The initial strike had been a success. Earth's railguns had cut through the enemy's shields like a knife through butter, tearing their supposedly superior machines to pieces. But he knew the battle was far from over. "General, more enemy forces inbound," shouted an officer from the command bunker. Carter lifted his binoculars and scanned the horizon. In the distance, a new wave of Zorian dropships descended from the skies, their black forms looming like thunderclouds. This time, they weren't just sending a strike team. They were sending an army. "All units, prepare for full engagement," Carter called out, his voice calm but commanding. He turned to his communications officer. "Alert all sectors. This is going to get messy." Zarlath watched from orbit, his confidence starting to crack as the human forces continued to hold their ground. The second wave of Zorian soldiers had landed, but instead of sweeping over Earth's defenses as expected, they were meeting fierce resistance. Human soldiers, though outnumbered, moved with tactical precision. They utilized cover, set traps, and launched coordinated counterattacks. The Zorians' advanced plasma rifles were powerful, but the humans' tactics and weapons were proving far more effective in real-world combat than Xalath had anticipated. The railguns were causing heavy damage to their vehicles, and Earth's missile systems, despite being primitive, were striking with deadly accuracy, taking out the Zorian gunships one by one. Serac stood beside his commander, his face grim. "Commander Xalath, the humans are employing guerrilla tactics. They're using the terrain to their advantage. Our forces are struggling to adapt." Xalath slammed his fist onto the control panel, snarling. "This is unacceptable. We are the Zorian Empire, the dominant force in this galaxy. How can they—" He cut himself off, his eyes narrowing as a thought occurred to him. "This isn't their technology, is it? They must have acquired it from another species. No pre-FTL race could have developed these weapons on their own." Serac opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, an explosion rocked the Devastator. The entire command deck shook, and Xalath's eyes widened in shock. "Commander!" one of the officers shouted. "We've been hit." Xalath spun around to the main display, watching in disbelief as a barrage of high-velocity projectiles slammed into his flagship's energy shields. Though the shields absorbed most of the damage, the sheer force of the impacts caused the ship to shudder. The humans were firing on them from the ground. How are they targeting us from the surface?" Serac asked, panic rising in his voice. "Activate evasive maneuvers," Xalath roared, "and return fire." Back on Earth, General Carter watched as the alien flagship shook from the force of Earth's railgun batteries. The defense grid had been programmed for precision targeting, and the orbital strikes were hitting their mark. But he knew they wouldn't hold the Zorian fleet off forever. "That's just to get their attention," Carter muttered to himself. "We need to wear them down, bit by bit, General." "The second wave is moving in," shouted one of the officers. Carter turned to see the advancing Zorian forces, their numbers overwhelming, their tanks and gunships hovering over the battlefield like an unstoppable wall of death. Carter keyed his radio. "All units, engage the fallback positions. Hit them from the flanks. Don't let them get a foothold." Earth soldiers moved quickly, withdrawing to secondary positions where more traps had been laid. Hidden anti-tank missiles and heavy artillery were ready, waiting for the Zorians to step into the kill zone. As the alien forces pressed forward, Earth's defenses struck again, launching a hailstorm of explosives and kinetic rounds. High Commander Xalath watched, growing more frustrated by the second. His troops should have crushed these humans by now. But each time they advanced, they were met with devastating firepower and calculated counterattacks. The humans were fighting as if they had been preparing for this exact scenario, and their technology, while appearing crude on the surface, was incredibly lethal. "Commander," Serac spoke up, his voice trembling, "perhaps we should reconsider our tactics. These humans are proving far more formidable than we—" Xalath whirled on him, his eyes blazing with fury. "Do not speak to me of tactics. We are superior in every way. They are nothing compared to us." But even as the words left his mouth, Xalath knew something was wrong. The humans weren't just surviving, they were winning. They had already taken out a significant portion of his ground forces, and now they were threatening his ships in orbit. The Zorian warlord turned back to the display, a cold knot forming in his gut. "Tell the fleet to prepare for full orbital bombardment. If we can't crush them on the ground, we'll turn this planet to ash." Serac hesitated. "Commander, our own forces are still deployed." "I don't care," Xalath snarled. "They will die for the glory of the Zorian Empire, if that's what it takes to defeat these humans." On Earth, General Carter received word that the Zorian fleet was preparing for an orbital strike. His face tightened as he realized what that meant. The aliens were willing to destroy their own troops just to take down Earth. "All units, brace for impact," Carter shouted over the comms. "Deploy the remaining defense grids and get the anti-aircraft batteries online." So the sky above them began to darken as the Zorian fleet's weapons charged, preparing to unleash hell upon the planet. But Earth wasn't finished yet. As the first wave of plasma fire rained down, Earth's anti-air defenses kicked into gear, launching a final volley of missiles and high-velocity rounds aimed directly at the Zorian fleet. Carter watched the sky with grim determination. Let's see if they can handle this. As the Zorian bombardment began, Earth's railguns and missiles tore into the fleet, forcing the invaders into a desperate retreat. The human forces, battered but unbroken, continued to push forward, taking advantage of the chaos to drive the alien invaders back. The once calm skies above Earth were now a battlefield of fire and chaos. High Commander Zarlath's flagship, Devastator, shook violently as Earth's railgun rounds and missile volleys slammed into its shields. The Zorian fleet, battered and disoriented, struggled to regain control after their failed assault on the planet below. From orbit, Zarlath watched in growing frustration as his forces faltered. Earth's defenses were proving far more formidable than he could have ever imagined. "Commander, our shields won't hold much longer." Serak's voice was strained with panic as the bridge of the Devastator shook again, sparks flying from overloaded control panels. Zarlath's hands clenched into fists. His pride had taken a hit, but he refused to accept defeat. Not to a race as primitive as humanity. "Hold the line," he barked. "Divert all power to shields and keep firing. We are not retreating." But even as he spoke, another volley of missiles shot up from Earth's surface, homing in on the Zorian fleet. Below, Earth's hidden defense systems, satellite networks, ground-based railguns, and concealed missile silos continued to rain destruction on the invaders. The humans had been underestimated, and now the Zorians were paying the price. On the ground, General Jonathan Carter stood in the command center, his face illuminated by the glow of the holographic display showing the ongoing battle. Reports were coming in from all over the planet. Cities were under siege, but Earth's military was holding strong, fighting back with a coordinated and disciplined defense. Earth was bleeding, but it was not breaking. "Sir, the orbital strikes are weakening," one of Carter's officers reported. "Our anti-air defenses are working. We're pushing them back." Carter nodded, his jaw clenched with determination. "Good. Keep up the pressure. They think they can take us out from orbit, but they'll learn soon enough that we're not as defenseless as they believe." He turned to his communications officer. "What's the status of the strike team?" "Ready to launch." "Sir, awaiting your orders." Carter's eyes narrowed as he studied the display of the Zorian fleet above. The time had come to take the fight to the invaders. Launch the team. Let's show them just how dangerous humanity can be. Far above Earth, a small squadron of human stealth fighters silently launched from hidden bases deep in the mountains. Cloaked in adaptive camouflage, the fighters were nearly invisible to Zorian scanners as they ascended through the atmosphere. Their mission: disable the Devastator and cripple the Zorian command structure. Inside the lead fighter, Captain Elena Hart gripped the controls, her eyes focused on the target ahead. She had been part of Earth's elite aerospace force for years, but this mission was unlike any she had ever undertaken. A direct assault on an alien warship was risky at best, but if humanity had any hope of surviving this invasion, they needed to cut the head off the snake. "All units, engage stealth systems," Hart ordered, her voice calm and steady over the comms. "We get one shot at this. Let's make it count." As the human fighters approached the Zorian flagship, the rest of the fleet remained focused on the ground battle, unaware of the silent threat moving toward them. The fighters weaved through debris and explosions, making their way toward the Devastator. They had one goal: disable the ship's power core and force the Zorian fleet to retreat. Back on the Devastator, High Commander Zarlath watched the battle unfold with growing fury. Despite his best efforts, the humans were still standing. Worse, they were fighting back with precision and ferocity that he hadn't anticipated. The humans' kinetic weapons were bypassing the Zorian shields, striking with devastating force. Plasma bolts from Zorian guns rained down on the planet, but the humans continued to hold their ground. "This is impossible," Zarlath hissed, pacing across the command deck. "No pre-FTL species should have the ability to counter our technology." Serak, standing at a nearby console, hesitated before speaking. "Commander, perhaps we've underestimated them." Their technology may be more advanced than we realized. These railguns and missiles, I know what they are, Zaleth snarled, cutting him off. But this is still our battle to win. Order the ground forces to press forward. No retreat. As the Zorian commanders scrambled to adjust their strategies, alarms blared across the Devastator's bridge. Zaleth turned to the main display, his eyes widening in shock. "Incoming!" one of the officers shouted. "We've got enemy fighters closing in." Captain Hart's squadron swooped in, their stealth systems disengaging as they launched their first barrage of high-velocity, armor-piercing rounds. The Devastator's shields flared under the assault, but Hart's team had done their homework. They knew where to strike. "Target their shield generators," Hart ordered, her eyes locked on the flagship's hull. "We need to take them down before they can recover." The human fighters unleashed a coordinated attack, focusing their fire on the vulnerable points of the Zorian warship. One by one, the generators overloaded, sending arcs of energy across the ship's surface. The shields flickered and then collapsed entirely. "Shields are down," one of Hart's pilots called out. "We've got a clear shot at the power core." Hart smiled grimly. "All units, engage the core. Let's end this." As the human fighters darted toward the now exposed core of the Devastator, the Zorian ship's anti-aircraft guns roared to life. Plasma bolts streaked across the sky, narrowly missing the agile human craft as they twisted and turned through the barrage. The Devastator's guns couldn't keep up with the speed and precision of the human fighters. Hart's hands moved quickly over the controls, guiding her fighter in close to the target. The power core of the Zorian flagship was a massive, glowing structure at the heart of the ship, pulsating with energy. If they could take it out, the entire ship would be crippled. "Engaging now," Hart said, her voice steady as she lined up her shot. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. A stream of high-velocity rounds erupted from her fighter's cannons, striking the core with pinpoint accuracy. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a blinding flash of light, the core exploded, sending shockwaves through the entire ship. On the bridge of the Devastator, Zaleth staggered as the ship lurched violently. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered as systems across the ship began to fail. Serac clung to a nearby console, his eyes wide with panic. "Commander, the power core has been breached," he shouted over the chaos. "We're losing control of the ship." Zaleth's eyes blazed with fury, but even he knew that the battle was lost. With the Devastator crippled, the rest of the fleet would be forced to retreat. His plans for Earth, for a quick and decisive conquest, had crumbled before his eyes. "Order the fleet to fall back," he growled, his voice filled with bitter rage. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." On the ground, General Carter watched as the Zorian fleet began to pull back, the once imposing ships limping away from Earth's orbit. The human forces cheered, but Carter remained solemn. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. "Commander, we've driven them off," one of the officers said, a note of triumph in his voice. "The Zorian fleet is retreating," Carter nodded, his face stern. "For now. But they'll be back." He turned his gaze toward the sky, where the remaining Zorian ships disappeared into the darkness of space. Humanity had faced the might of the Zorian Empire and survived, but the cost had been high. Cities lay in ruins, and the bodies of the fallen littered the battlefield. But Earth still stood, defiant and unbroken. Carter keyed his radio, his voice steady. "All units, stand down. We've won this round, but stay ready. The galaxy knows our name now, and they won't forget it." As the sun began to set over the smoldering remains of the battlefield, Carter couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Humanity had proven its strength, but with that victory came new dangers. The Zorians would return, and next time, they wouldn't make the mistake of underestimating Earth. The Zorian fleet, once a formidable presence in Earth's skies, was now in full retreat. From the safety of their command posts, Earth's leaders watched the alien ships limping away, their glowing hulls battered and broken by the relentless barrage of human weaponry. For the first time in centuries, the Zorian Empire had been forced to abandon a campaign, a humiliation they would neither forget nor forgive. General Jonathan Carter stood atop a makeshift command platform, surveying the smoking battlefield below. His face was hard, lined with exhaustion, yet there was a fire in his eyes. They had done it. Against all odds, humanity had not only survived, but had driven back the most advanced military force in the galaxy. But this victory was bittersweet. Around him, the wounded were being evacuated, and the dead were being counted. The cost had been high, and Earth's future remained uncertain. "General," a voice crackled through his earpiece. It was Captain Elena Hart, fresh from her assault on the Devastator. "Enemy fleet is in full retreat. We've crippled their command ship, but they're regrouping. It's not over." Carter nodded grimly. "Understood, Captain. You and your team did good work up there. But you're right, this isn't over. The Zorians will be back." He turned to his staff, already preparing for what would come next. "Get the tech teams on salvaging what we can from the wreckage. Any alien tech we can recover will give us an edge when they return." Around the world, humanity began to pick up the pieces. The Zorians had left devastation in their wake. Cities lay in ruins, with entire districts reduced to rubble by plasma strikes and orbital bombardments. Yet, amid the chaos, there was a quiet sense of triumph. Earth had faced a superior force and prevailed, but the question on everyone's minds was clear: what happens next? Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, news of the Zorian defeat spread like wildfire. In the halls of the Galactic Council, a gathering of the most powerful species in the universe, the mention of humanity was met with disbelief and fear. Earth, once considered a primitive backwater, had done the unthinkable. They had stood up to the Zorian Empire and won. In a grand chamber illuminated by soft, bioluminescent light, the council gathered for an emergency session. Dozens of species, some resembling insectoids, others towering behemoths of flesh and metal, sat in judgment, their eyes and senses fixed on the central holographic display. Footage of the battle played on a loop, human railguns tearing through Zorian shields, stealth fighters crippling the Devastator, and the Zorian fleet retreating from Earth's orbit in shame. At the center of the council chamber stood Chancellor Volrex, a dignified figure with smooth, dark scales and a commanding presence. His eyes, deep-set and calculating, surveyed the gathered council members. The defeat of the Zorians had shaken the galactic order, and now humanity's future was at stake. "The humans," Volrex began, his voice deep and resonant, "are no longer the primitive species we once thought them to be. They have proven their resilience and technological ingenuity. The question before us is this: do we treat them as a threat or as an ally?" Murmurs of disagreement rippled through the chamber. Some species, like the Zaan Collective, a race of insect-like beings, whispered of forming alliances with humanity, recognizing their potential strength. Others, like the warlike Creel Dominion, voiced concerns about allowing such a dangerous species to rise unchecked. "They are unpredictable," a Creel representative bellowed, his voice echoing off the chamber walls. "Their lack of advanced technology has made them desperate and dangerous. If we do not act, they could upset the balance of power in the galaxy." "Desperation?" retorted an insectoid Zaan counselor, his mandibles clicking in agitation. "Or adaptability? They have survived despite being outgunned. This makes them worthy of consideration." Chancellor Volrex listened in silence, his mind racing. The humans had changed the game. Their victory against the Zorians was both a warning and an invitation. Now, the galaxy would have to decide whether Earth was a threat to be contained or an ally to be courted. Back on Earth, General Carter sat in his command bunker, reviewing the latest reports. Alien wreckage had been recovered, and Earth scientists were already working to reverse engineer Zorian technology. Railguns and missiles had won the battle, but the next conflict would require more than brute force. Earth needed to be ready for whatever came next. "General," a voice came from the entrance. It was Captain Hart, her flight suit still scuffed from battle. She saluted, and Carter returned the gesture. "Captain," Carter said, standing, "your team did the impossible up there. Taking out the Devastator was a hell of a move. Hart gave a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed the weight of the day. It wasn't easy, sir, but we did what we had to. What now? Carter sighed, rubbing the back of his neck as he stared at the maps and displays covering the bunker walls. Now, we rebuild, and we get ready. The Zorians will come back, and next time, they'll be smarter. More prepared. But so will we. He walked over to the main console, pulling up a map of the galaxy with Earth at its center. We've shown the galaxy what we're capable of, and that means we've painted a target on our backs. Hart nodded. Do you think they'll try to ally with us? The other species? Carter's face darkened. Maybe, but alliances in this galaxy are always temporary. The moment they see an advantage, they'll turn on us. That's why we need to stay one step ahead. Earth can't rely on anyone else. We have to be ready to defend ourselves. Far from Earth, aboard the damaged remnants of the Zorian fleet, High Commander Zalath stood in the ruins of his once proud bridge. The Devastator was a shell of its former self, barely holding together as the ship limped toward Zorian space. His eyes were dark with rage and humiliation. Commander, Serac approached cautiously, his voice low. We lost many good soldiers today. The fleet, I know what we lost, Zalath hissed, his voice a low growl. He turned, his claws flexing. But we will recover, and when we do, we will return to that wretched planet and burn it to ash. Serac hesitated. But the humans, they surprised us. Their technology, they are nothing, Zalath snapped, his eyes glowing with fury. We underestimated them, but next time, we will crush them without mercy. They think they can stand against us. Against the Zorian Empire? No, we will show them their place. They may have won a battle, but the war is far from over. Serac bowed his head. As you say, Commander. Zalath turned to the viewports, staring into the endless expanse of space. His pride was wounded, but his resolve was stronger than ever. The humans had humiliated him, but he would have his revenge. And when the Zorian Empire returned to Earth, there would be no escape for humanity. Back on Earth, General Carter stood on a hill overlooking one of the many devastated cities. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, illuminating the ruins left by the Zorian invasion. Yet, despite the destruction, there was hope. Survivors were already working to rebuild. Soldiers were returning to their families. Earth had endured. Carter took a deep breath, the weight of the future heavy on his shoulders. Humanity had taken its first step into the larger galaxy, and now there was no turning back. The Zorians would return, and other species would watch closely, waiting to see what Earth would do next. But one thing was certain. The galaxy now knew that humanity was not to be underestimated. The humans, with their so-called primitive weapons, had proven themselves in the crucible of war. And as Carter looked up at the stars, he knew that Earth's true battle had only just begun. This concludes our story. Thank you for listening. Please comment your favorite moment. Stay tuned for more interesting stories.